The Vietnam War lasted for 20 long years, from 1955 to 1975. On one side was America, the most powerful military in the world, and on the other side was Vietnam, a small agricultural country. The result? America's crushing defeat. But why? The Vietnam War was one of the most difficult and controversial wars in American history. It lasted for nearly 20 years and involved millions of soldiers, civilians, and massive destruction. Even though the United States had the world's strongest military, it still failed to win the war. To understand why America couldn't win Vietnam, we first need to understand the background of the conflict. After World War II, Vietnam was under French colonial control, but a communist leader named Ho Chi Minh wanted Vietnam to become independent. His forces fought against France for years. In 1954, the French were defeated at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. After that, Vietnam was divided into two parts. North Vietnam, controlled by communists under Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam, supported by the United States of America, feared that if Vietnam became communist, other Asian countries might also fall to communism. This idea was called the domino theory. Because of this fear, the United States decided to support South Vietnam with money, weapons, and military advisors. At first, America only sent advisors, but by the 1960s, the situation became worse. Communist fighters called the Viet Cong began attacking South Vietnam using guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare was very different from normal warfare. Instead of fighting in large open battles, the Viet Cong used surprise attacks, hidden tunnels, jungle ambushes, traps, and hit-and-run tactics. They knew the jungles extremely well and could disappear quickly after attacking. American soldiers struggled in Vietnam's harsh environment. The jungles were hot, muddy, and filled with insects and diseases. Soldiers often could not tell who was an enemy and who was a civilian because Viet Cong fighters blended into villages and local populations. Despite this, America continued increasing its military presence. By 1968, more than 500,000 American troops were in Vietnam. The United States used massive military power, heavy bombing campaigns, napalm bombs, helicopter assaults, advanced weapons and technology. America believed superior firepower would eventually destroy the communist forces, but the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong refused to surrender. One of the biggest turning points of the war happened in 1968 during the Tet Offensive. During the Vietnamese New Year holiday called Tet, communist forces launched surprise attacks across South Vietnam, including attacks inside major cities and even near the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Although America eventually pushed back the attacks militarily, the offensive shocked the American public. The U.S. government had been saying the war was nearly won, but television footage showed chaos, destruction, and heavy fighting everywhere. For the first time, many Americans began believing the war could not be won. Television played a huge role in changing public opinion. Every night, Americans watched graphic images of wounded soldiers, destroyed villages, and dead civilians. The Vietnam War became known as the First Television War. As casualties increased, anti-war protests exploded across the United States. College students, activists, musicians, and even war veterans began demanding an end to the conflict. Many young Americans were also angry about the military draft, which forced thousands of men into the war. Meanwhile, North Vietnam continued receiving support from powerful communist allies like the Soviet Union and China. This helped them continue fighting despite massive losses. American soldiers also suffered mentally and emotionally. Many troops faced extreme stress, fear, and confusion. Some soldiers returned home with severe psychological trauma. Another major problem was corruption and weakness inside the South Vietnamese government. Many civilians in South Vietnam did not fully trust their own leaders, making it harder for America to build stable support against communism. By the early 1970s, the U.S. government realized the war was becoming impossible to sustain. Public support had collapsed, casualties were rising, and billions of dollars had already been spent. In 1973, the United States signed the Paris Peace Accords and officially withdrew most American troops from Vietnam. However, fighting between North and South Vietnam continued. Without direct American military support, South Vietnam became weaker and weaker. Finally, in April 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. Helicopters evacuated desperate civilians and American personnel from rooftops as communist tanks entered the city. Saigon fell, and Vietnam became a unified communist country. The Vietnam War caused enormous destruction. More than 58,000 American soldiers died. Millions of Vietnamese civilians and soldiers were killed. Large parts of Vietnam were devastated by bombing and chemicals. For America, the war became a symbol of military failure, political mistakes, and the limits of military power. Even today, historians continue debating the war and asking the same question: could America ever have truly won in Vietnam?